And the rates of reasonableness for shipping have been established by law and are to be used by the STB to evaluate rail rates. The current threshold for the rate of unreasonableness is 180% of variable cost. You also stated that some rates in wheat growing areas are as high as 400% above the variable cost. So just a couple of questions. Could you sort of explain what is meant by variable cost, what goes into that, and how are shippers in these areas handling the situation right now, and how do they make ends meet, and what attempts have been made to remedy the situation?
Well, these GAO studies were done in 2006, so a lot of this information was from that time period. Mm-hmm. That's the most recent data we've had. And I stated that that they have been as high as 300 to 400%. We had, with some negotiations we've had with the railroads, they are working, and we've had one huge problem in Montana and that state as far as rates go, and they are working to get those rates down. And I think a lot of it is a direct result of our going to the railroads and through this process of bringing legislation forward. Had this legislation not been brought forward, there was no incentive to address rate issues. So all those variable costs are passed on to the producer, and as also was stated, a lot of these efficiency that the railroad has become more efficient with shuttle trains, it has been at the expense of the producer, because instead of delivering our wheat to a local facility, we've had to truck it further distances to get to a shuttle facility, and putting more cost on producers. So I think that's an important point to make. The railroad has become more efficient, and rates have gone down on shuttle facilities, but it's larger shipments, and it has put more cost on the producers.
Okay. Thank you very much. Dr. Keith, if I could go to you next. You had mentioned one of the costs that have to be dealt with is the fuel surcharges, which have been going up.
Yes.
And I assume that that's related to the overall additional increases in energy that consumers are dealing with at the gas pumps, or that our truckers are dealing with diesel. I mean, it's just costing us much more. And my question would be, getting to what we as a Congress, or what we as a nation ought to be doing about that. Would you agree that one of the problems is that we're too dependent on foreign sources of energy? We need to go after what we have accessible to us, and that two of those places that we do have access to that we've put off limits are up in Alaska and Anwar, and in the Outer Continental Shelf. It's a debate we have around here all the time, and I don't know if you'd like to weigh into it.
Well, yes, I mean, dependence on foreign oil is a national problem, and we think it's time to get down to business on solving the problem in practical ways. We don't think that the railroads are out of line by wanting to recoup some of their increased costs. It is a cost of doing business. However, some of the formulas that they had at one stage were extremely biased toward their revenue bottom line, and those things we think have been largely corrected. But we're a little disappointed that the STB did not require the railroads to provide more information about how they compute surcharges across modes, because you cannot compare the surcharge that's applied to grain and compare that, and whether it's fair compared to coal or intermodal. You simply don't have the data. And that was another STB ruling that we were a little disappointed in.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Hotchkiss, you had mentioned in your written testimony that rail transportation is often unreliable, and that this contributes to the loss of customers. In your past experiences, what have the railroads done that make them unreliable? Do you have any particular instances? Or?
Well, what we have experienced nationally is not dissimilar to what the other gentlemen here on this panel have discussed. Time frames that they were supposed to have delivery. We had one instance where a major railroad put an embargo, basically just stopped delivery for a while, and there's catch-22s in that because of certain contractual situations. You can't go to another hauler. And so you're forced perhaps to truck it in, and as has already been mentioned, if you have to truck it in, you're looking at 4 or 5 trucks on the road as opposed to a rail car. We have tried to meet the railroads in a way of actually paying for the building out of infrastructure when we get into this short line situation. We have literally paid for the rail cars. We've tried to get the lighter rail cars that they're asking us and the longer ones for aluminum. So basically, we feel like we keep trying to help and we keep trying to be a good customer, and we're not necessarily getting the same response back. And that has just continually been an issue. And so when we run into low inventory situations, we have to find alternative ways to either get the coal there, or we have to do and buy on the spot market. We just don't have it. Those are things that wreak havoc on our systems.
Thank you very much. I should probably note, you mentioned Catch-22. I heard this morning on NPR that I believe today is Joseph Heller's, or would be his birthday, who wrote the book Catch-22 that comes from. And I knew everyone would appreciate me bringing that to their attention. So, and then finally, Mr. Weber, what type of special handling do the goods that you ship require, and are they more difficult to handle? And I assume that has something to do with the increased cost as well. Is that correct?
Somewhat. The rail cars they use for coal is the same we use for fertilizer. The same rail cars they use for grain are the same ones we use for fertilizer. They just sweep them out, clean them, and they'll load grain going back to, the receivers. And the only one that has a special use is the pressurized vessels for anhydrous ammonia. That is a specific use vessel, and that is more cost. The railroad has been asking for a waiver to where they wouldn't be held accountable if there was a accident on the rail system and the anhydrous was relieved. They were wanting to cap their liability there. If they do that, they need to do the truckers that we have to employ 4 more trucks for every rail car we don't receive. So if they're going to do that, then also to issue that to the truckers. Because right now, I have real difficulty finding enough trucks when that rail car doesn't show up, because there's a difficulty in the drivers, availability of drivers, and the bottles themselves that we need for transport.
Okay, thank you. And just to make sure I have this clear, the general breakdown would be about, if you had 4 tractor-trailer trucks, you're talking about the trucks that would equal, in general, one railroad car.
Correct.
That's correct.
Okay.